one of the big themes of this Center on Longevity's New Map of Life initiative is that living longer will mean that we will have longer working lives. So we already touched on the fact that lifelong learning is going to be essential to making that happen. But we're going to have to work longer because we're going to need to not only need to finance longer lives, but for many, work provides meaning and purpose, social connection, and engagement. But access to good careers and jobs that provide opportunity for financial security and long-term engagement, they're not available to everyone. So the topic for our next panel is really how can we provide access to good jobs, not just jobs, but good jobs that provide healthy careers, provide work-life balance, and financial security. So leading our next session is Ramsey Alwin, who is the current CEO of the National Council on Aging and someone I've known for quite a while. And as long as I've known Ramsey, she has been a thought leader and a policy advocate for the issues around adult poverty and economic security. Prior to rejoining NCOA in 2020, Ramsey was at AARP, and she was leading AARP's thought leadership activities on financial resilience and longevity policy and research, which often included discussions around working longer. So thank you.
Thank you, Martha, and good morning to everyone. For years, many of us have heard John Chauvin talk about the fact that 40 years of work can't finance 30 years without work. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Let's all make sure our mics are on. How are we now? Very good. So good morning and good to see you. I just wanted to level set and remind us all that have heard John Chauvin over the years talk about the fact that 40 years of work couldn't possibly finance 30 years without work. And the reality is, as many of us are living longer, that intentionality around the good job, the good career is so essential. I think it's provocative to talk about a 60-year career, but actually not so far-fetched. At the National Council on Aging, every day, we hear from 70-year-olds and 80-year-olds that want and need to work. And just two quick stories. One is Mary. Mary, at 79, had worked hard, played by the rules, but found herself during the pandemic caught up in an online scam, which drained all of her savings. So at 79 years old, she came to the National Council on Aging asking for help finding a job, a skill refresh, a resume refresh, and at 80 years old, she's enjoying a great job and a great opportunity to pursue her purpose and her meaning. Linda, 74 years old, in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, had cared for her mother for the past 10 years. Upon her mother's passing, she was no longer able to make ends meet. It worked when she had her Social Security and her mother's Social Security. But without that additional income, property taxes, utilities staying the same, she came to NCOA also looking for work after those caregiving years. So the idea of a 60-year career and a job, not so far-fetched, but access to a good career, good jobs, that's what we need to talk about. And as we all think about work, whether it be changing the linens in the hotel, working the line at the factory, taking meetings at the downtown office or the home office, the other reality is the workplace is evolving to be a social determinant of health. The ability to work and what work means for our health and our economic security has lasting implications. So it's my pleasure today to be joined by Jane Oates of WorkingNation and Beth Cobert with the Markle Foundation to discuss timely trends, opportunities, and the challenges related to helping more people access good careers. So Jane is the former U.S. Department of Labor official, playing a key role in WorkingNation's mission to raise awareness about the challenges facing American workforce. Jane served as the Assistant Secretary for the Employment and Training Administration under the Obama administration. Prior to her appointment, she was Executive Director of the New Jersey Commission on Higher Education, a senior advisor to Governor Corzine, and also served for nearly a decade as a senior policy advisor for Senator Kennedy of Massachusetts. Beth is president of the Markle Foundation, and in this role, Beth leads the Rework America Alliance, a unique partnership of civil rights organizations, nonprofits, private sector employers, labor unions, educators, and so many others that are working to open up opportunities for millions of people from low-wage roles to move into good jobs with opportunities for career advancement. Now, Beth has honed her leadership skills as acting director of the Office of Personnel Management under President Obama, and before her time at OPM, she served as deputy director for management at the Office of Management and Budget. She also began her career at McKinsey & Company. So both great individuals to explore this topic with today. Let's first start talking a bit about future of work and the trends. So Jane, do you want to kick us off? What do you think is the future of work, given the increased longevity so many are experiencing, plus their desire or need to work longer?
So I think the future of work is really changing day by day. Technology has made the speed of changes on the workplace almost out of our understanding. Today, everybody's using technology, and for workers who are 50 and older, that technology may be something brand new to them, might be something threatening to them. I think it's hard when we're in an environment like this to remember that we're in the minority. College educated people are really in the minority in this country, and many of the people who do not have a college degree really feel threatened by education, really feel like education did not work for them, that they were dumb. And what we need to get them to understand is they were just poorly counseled.
Important point. And Beth, your thoughts?
So first, thanks for having me, and it's great to be here I'm sure will be a great discussion with Jane and you. I think Jane keyed on a couple of things that are really important about the future of work. And one of them is, I think, the pace at which transformation is happening in every person's job. We can all think about what was, life pre-pandemic and how we operated differently. The Burning Glass Institute's done a recent study that said for the average occupation since 2017, 37% of the skills you need for that occupation have changed. So that's nearly half of the skills you need for the average job has changed. And that's not just tech jobs. If you're a home health aide, the odds are you are using some form of digital device to communicate with your supervisors to monitor your patient. It's true if you are working in facilities management. That's probably where you get the guidelines of what you should do every day. And it's not just digital changes, but all sorts of changes. And so to me, one of the things that's a constant in the future of work and relates to the last conversation is that we're all going to be having to learn new things over the course of what's going to be an increasingly long working life. And how can we create the systems, the institutions, the processes, the incentives that really enable individuals to keep doing that learning? Because while they might not do it all in one bite in 4 years, they're going to need that over time, again and again and again.
And Beth, I think you said something that I think should be underscored in everybody's mind, that digital skills are the new basic skill. And if you think about what we learned in terms of digital skills when we were in formal education, zero. But if you think about what traditional educational institutions are doing to teach digital skills, I think we're still really close to zero. They just assume that everybody who got in or everybody that's there knows them. So I think those digital skills are critically important at every age level.
Absolutely. And we'll double down on that in just a moment. But to further set the table in talking about helping more people access good jobs, Beth, let's talk about the 62%. Yep. 62% of Americans, or 100 million Americans, pursue careers without a bachelor's degree. And we think about what a bachelor's degree provides in terms of a ticket to a good job, a trajectory for a great career, stable wages, benefits, and 62% of Americans don't have that ticket. What does that mean in terms of the future? Are we talking about a majority destitute, impoverished population if we don't address that issue?
So when I think about this issue, I think about it both from the perspective of the individuals who aren't getting opportunity and from the perspective of employers and organizations who are missing out on talent that is there in front of them, but they don't see it, they don't look for it, and they don't support it. So you hear today from many companies saying, I can't find the talent I need. They can't find the talent they need looking in the same places in the same ways, looking for people who look like them and not like our increasingly diverse population across the country. So for us to solve this problem, I think we do need to focus on what's a quality job. The Department of Labor has been talking about that, the Aspen Institute. You can find many people, but it's a role that both provides a family sustaining wage, opportunities for advancement, and the supports that individuals need. And you need companies to really change their practices to say, how can I get what I need? How can I focus on the individual skills built through a variety of experiences? McKinsey did a recent study that shows that sort of 50% of your earnings was based on skills you built in the workplace, not through formal education. So why are we over-focused on that? And why are we not thinking about the transferability of skills? The things that you learned about customer service working front of house in a restaurant. We started the Alliance during the pandemic. There were lots of people working front of house in a restaurant who didn't have jobs. Those are real problem-solving skills, interpersonal skills that are valuable for so many other occupations. And so there's lots of ways to think about that. We need to open up those possibilities. And that's the work we're doing. And I think there's enormous potential there for individuals to gain mobility and companies to gain great talent.
Jane, what are your thoughts on that barrier to entry? Are employers just using a shortcut, an easy, cheap way to filter in and filter out? And what are the implications for so many women, communities of color?
Yeah, I think in fairness, chief human resource officers do what has always been done, and I think it's incumbent upon the C-suite to change how they're seen as successful. I mean, right now you're a CHRO, you're successful if you fill a job within 30 days. Well, and the fastest way to fill that is to have a job description that says bachelor's degree preferred or required, whether it is or not. If you go to a SHRM meeting today, there are very few CHROs in big companies or managers in smaller companies who can tell you what the skills are. They can tell you a degree helps. And yet we have found so much research being done by great organizations like McKinsey, like Burning Glass, that the average person working in a job today with a bachelor's degree, that job does not require the skills of a bachelor's degree. So there's a mismatch everywhere. Those people with a bachelor's degree are underemployed. They're making less money than they should. And the people who really have the skills for those jobs are not getting access to them. Think of this. You didn't go to college. You worked hard your whole life. And you see a job description that says bachelor's degree preferred. Do you apply for it? Absolutely not. Your confidence level says they don't want me. And we are losing. Beth is so right. And her work that began in Colorado and is now national underscored that those people who were afraid to apply for a job because it was mislabeled are really talented and could have done that job to the nines and been really successful and made more money. So I think this change, great organizations, nonprofits, some colleges getting a little bit behind it, because when you heard Eloy speak, he didn't speak about the great work that he did at his own college when he was a president at Long Beach, but what they did across California by embedding credentials, by having a program where somebody could earn more because they put their courses in a sequence where they got an industry recognized credential. So they didn't have to work for minimum wage at front of restaurant. They could instead work as an EMT as they were pursuing their nursing degree. He and other college presidents, 2 and 4 year, really are doing that. Now we have to get employers to do the same thing, to pay that education as a benefit to all workers, not just the C-suite, not just people who are on a leadership trajectory, but help them get those credentials so they can move up.
And that's a great segue to talk about lifelong learning, training, apprenticeships, 6 decades of work, when the nature of work is changing at light speed, really raises the question about how we think about how we finance, how the public sector, private sector, individuals, nonprofits contribute to training. What are your thoughts, Beth, in terms of where does the onus reside and where are the innovations?
So as the previous panel said, I think the solution to this question about training resolves across those sectors. So there's a role for the private sectors and employers to invest in their workforce. And you're starting to see a lot of more companies recognizing that investment pays off for them. They are only going to do this at scale if it is in their business interest, and they are increasingly recognizing that. both in their companies. You see companies like Guild Education, which is based actually in Denver, where I live, that supports companies in paying for tuition reimbursement for their workers. And those companies are doing it because it brings them a business return. So there's a role for employers. There's a role for individuals. 87% of individuals believe that they should be investing in their training, but they're not sure where. And so I think there's an opportunity to provide them with better navigation and support for where can they go? Where do they have a good starting point based upon their work, but where can they take it to? You know, there's everything from tools we built with McKinsey and the Federal Reserve Bank and the National Urban League about job progression. So if you were in that front of house role, where can you go? So individuals, I think, actually want to take that agency. And there is a role for government, because when you need to do things at scale, you need the government involved. And so that can happen at the federal level. There's also tons of innovation at the state level, across states, red and blue. This is one of the places where there actually is some commonality about providing incentives for employers. Indiana has a terrific program called Next Level Jobs that supports small and mid-sized companies in paying for training for their workforce for high demand jobs. So they know that they're going to get a benefit for their company, and they're going to be doing that training for a role for an individual who can then take those capabilities and leverage it over the course of their career.
Fabulous. And Jane, what are your thoughts on innovations or ways maybe we could further incentivize employers, leveraging the tax code to invest in the human capital that's necessary?
Yeah, I think we don't let the federal government off, not because we're doing an Obama reunion here, but we don't let the federal government off the hook. The federal government today allows employers to take a tax deduction for individual employees of $5,250, right? So they get a return on that. That's been the same since 1987. Now, if you look at the cost of education since 1987, that makes you scratch your head. Why doesn't the federal government, it's not corporate welfare, it's saying to corporations, we want to incent you to invest in your workforce, because when they make more money, we at the federal government get more taxes. I mean, it's a no-brainer, but no one has had the courage to say that should probably be doubled. Employers should be incented to spend $10,000 a year on employee development, because if you're a line worker, if you're in advanced manufacturing right now, when you worked hard and were a machinist and got your industry recognized credential from NIMS 25 years ago, and you've learned on the job, now digital technology has come into your workplace and you're like, whoa, I'm going to retire before I learn this. Unless your employer says, I'm going to give you the time during your workday to go to this place that we've vetted that gives high quality education, and you're going to learn the digital skills that you need to continue to be a productive, loyal worker in my company. Right now, 5250 doesn't do it. And, you know, I want to stop and say that Beth is so right. If you're not, you need to look at the work that Markle's doing, but she's so right about Guild. Why was a company like Guild, an entrepreneur, young woman, Rachel Carlson started that. Think of yourself, not now, but I can think of myself when I was a starting teacher. My starting salary, my first year of teaching, was $8,000 a year. If someone had said, I want you to take a $500 course and then we'll reimburse you once you pass it, I would have probably been distraught about where I was going to get that $500. And I had a bachelor's degree. So these workers previously had to pay up front for their course, wait to get reimbursed until they successfully complete it. And if they didn't successfully complete, they didn't get reimbursed at all. For people who don't have $400, $500 in my example of expendable income, that was a game changer. Guild pays those, has instructed employers, now you don't pay up front. You know, you don't have any outlay, and someone gives you some career guidance as you're doing it. That's the way it should be. Your parents, my parents made it easy for me, you know, and somebody needs to make it easy for these 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old workers who need to be upskilled in order to keep their current job or to get a better career path.
That's right. And for all ages and all stages.
Absolutely.
The 70 million baby boomers that want and need to continue to work, the 90 million millennials that are likely to live to be at least 100. We need a whole new approach to this investment. But I can't help but think when we talk about 6 decades of work and a career of my own family. So I'm the daughter of a lobster fisherman and a waitress. And those hard jobs on your feet every day take a toll on your body. And if this is the new normal, this is the expectation. What does that mean for manual laborers? Can technology help? What are some of our strategies for those that are in these jobs on their feet, heavy lifting, taking a toll on their body? What are your thoughts, Beth?
So it is a real dilemma. I think this is a place where technology can help some, not completely, right? There are ways when you're thinking about in construction, that robots and other things are actually helping enable people to continue in these jobs. But for jobs that require, real physical labor, it is a challenge. And so part of this is thinking about, as you said, what's the framing of a 60-year career and how do we provide people with the navigation, the guidance, and the time and space to think about what are they going to do next, right? What are the skills they have in jobs, including jobs with physical labor? And I'd argue that every job with physical labor today most likely also involves some form of electronic device. They don't come separate anymore. So how do they start thinking about that transition so when that becomes necessary, they're ready, as opposed to waiting until it's too late? How do you do it in advance and have a mindset that says, when you're, driving a long haul truck, that's a physical job, but you've also today, if you look in the cab of that truck, there's a whole lot of digital displays and things you're using. You've learned how to operate a machine, right? How do you think about it that way? And so you've got to start, but the challenges of a 60-year career and a 60-year career with physical labor, we still have a lot to do to figure out how to get that transition.
Yeah, and I really applaud, I'm so lucky at WorkingNation. I don't have to do any of these things. I just go around and tell other people's stories. But one of the most encouraging things that I've seen is the re-emergence, the respect to career and technical education. And, we talk about family sustaining wage paying jobs. I doubt that there are people in this audience, all of us, that make as much as a plumber. Try to get a plumber to come to your house for under $100 just to walk in the door before they look at your faucet. But I think career and technical education has provided a pivot in a career pathway for many of these people who are in, construction or advanced manufacturing to come in to get the skills they need to be an instructor, to be a teacher at the secondary level, to be faculty at a community college, even in some of these for-profit schools where they're bringing them in. And I think of that truck driver. I've seen so many really great examples. I couldn't stay awake 12 hours and drive on highways with lights blaring at me and things like that. It really, while you're not lifting things, you're not unloading the truck, it's physical. And the pathways to go from driving to logistics, the fastest way to get from point A to point B, and it's different if it's high traffic or low traffic. All of a sudden, for you to move into the back room, use those digital skills that you either learn or learned on the job and become the person who tracks the routes, that does that rather than do the driving. There's amazing solutions out there, and we should be really talking about those solutions so that if somebody, in Palo Alto comes up with a solution, somebody in Omaha, Nebraska can learn from that. And that's the importance of these partnerships and these networks. It really is. Every little locality, every employer is not on their own. They can join together and learn from one another.
And expanding our mindsets, thinking about the experience, the wisdom from those jobs and how it can be parlayed in the coaching, the mentorship. I think of my father as a lobster fisherman. He went out on the boat every day until the end, but he also became an advocate. He got involved in conservation and went to the capital of Augusta in Maine and started to take some of his expertise from what he saw on the ocean and talk about the conservation of the resource in the next generation. So opening up our own thinking and the pathways to parlay that knowledge and wisdom beyond the manual labor itself. But another theme as we think about navigating 6 decades of work is caregiving. It's really inevitable. And it's not if, but when and how many times each of us are called to take care of loved ones, whether it be children, older, frailer family members, or our partners. And that caregiving has implications for the time at work, the time pursuing lifelong learning. So interested in your thoughts on how we can help those with caregiving responsibilities in growing their career while balancing their family and community commitments, Beth.
So this is another one where it's inevitable and the challenge is real. I think this is a place where the pandemic did help us. I think we all learned, for those of us who had the privilege of having jobs that we could operate from home or from someplace else, to realize that, we didn't need everybody in the same place at the same time to be productive. And I think that really opened up the minds of corporate America, right? There are benefits from being there in place, but you don't need everybody sitting in the same room all the time. That's an enormous opportunity for people who are doing caregiving part-time, right? So that they have ways to continue to be in roles that they find satisfying, to continue to be, eligible for advancement. And so I think that's really helped us. Technology there is our friend in terms of flexibility. I think we haven't solved that problem for people whose jobs require physical presence. Whether you're a teacher or a nurse or the person at the checkout line at the supermarket, those individuals don't have the privilege of that flexibility. And we still, as a country, need to focus on how we can make sure that, that the equation isn't so unfair when it comes to some people have that flexibility and some people don't.
And we need to make sure that every American has paid family leave. I mean, it's just confusing to me why we can think that we're not going to need to take time off from work. And then I would say, as people get into these positions, particularly if you have someone that hopefully is going to have a long life needing your care that isn't short term, we need to put protections in for gig workers. I mean, today, during the pandemic, gig workers had opportunities to get unemployment insurance, for instance, if their employer closed or laid them off. That's ridiculous that didn't continue after the height of COVID was over. And what's really hurtful to me is that no member of Congress has proposed that we make that permanent. And that gig workers are going to be a part of our economy moving forward. Many of them in their older years. I don't know how often you take Uber, but you go into Uber oftentimes or Lyft, and your driver is 65 or older, supplementing their income, enjoying a job where they can have the freedom to hike if they feel like hiking, or spend time with their grandchildren, but they have no protections. And, those are the most visible gig jobs. There are so many others. So I really think we need to have public policy that A, gives paid family leave to everybody, and 2, protects those workers that either by choice or by their opportunities have to work in these gig positions.
Agreed. And I think there are many lessons we can learn from the self-employed and the gig work being the new normal for so many changing jobs and careers over a lifetime. And think about a new social contract, a new social insurance approach to making sure all those other needs are being met. But one more question for you, then I'd love to open it up to the audience, both in person and online, for any questions you might have. But before we go there, the pandemic was an incredible accelerator. You mentioned, Beth, flexible work and the technology and everyone jumping on Zoom, but also having the ability to maybe pick the kids up after school or run to the grocery store at an hour that is not so busy. So tell me a little bit in terms of the pandemic's acceleration of future work. What are some of the good changes? What are maybe some of the challenges that were further exacerbated given that accelerant?
So you mentioned a couple of them, and the pandemic did change a lot of things. And I think it's for all of us to take those good parts and accelerate them. It showed that you could have flexibility. It really, I think, also showed how nimble we can be as individuals and organizations, that all of us had our jobs turned upside down and we were able to adapt. I actually think that's a mindset shift that's really important for individuals at all levels. Everyone had to act differently. It also reinforced some things that are really important. The digital divide, both in terms of access to digital technology, the skills to operate it well was a real barrier for many people, for many people's children, for many people's family, right? You needed a device that would work, that would stay connected, and knowledge of how to use it. And so to me, it also reinforced the need to focus on closing that digital divide. And I think the last thing which it helped with and could be is to really get us to think about, and this comes back to something Jane said, the way we're going to create opportunity and new opportunities for people is to focus on what's needed in a role. What does a person bring? What can we teach them on the job that's particular to that role in that company? And how can that transfer from other places? And I think the flexibility we saw, to me, is one of the great opportunities. We can work differently. We saw all sorts of people step up in different ways. And I think we have to keep that mindset in our heads that says there is enormous potential in so many people if we allow it and support those individuals to take on that greater role.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, I mean, aside from the million people that we lost, and I never want to say anything positive until I acknowledge that, because many of you in here may have lost someone. But the reality is, I think it was, a masterclass in American resilience. I mean, people came together to help in their communities. People came together to really move the ball forward. We rebuilt our economy back to pre-pandemic levels in less than a year. I mean, that's remarkable. Countries all over the world are still struggling. We have our own problems. But I think the biggest gift that the pandemic gave us is it took the blinders off once and for all to inequity. I mean, there is no one in the United States right now who isn't acutely aware of all the inequities that exist in healthcare, in education, and opportunity. And now I think the next few years are going to tell us what are we going to do about it.
Agreed. How can we have some targeted but universal investments and policy changes so all can get the gift of the quality of years and the quantity of years? Any questions from the audience or online, please?
I can talk loudly. So I like that. What I agree with everything you're saying, and we do a lot. My nonprofit in educating older adults, especially with the digital divide, bring them up to speed. The problem that we have to address, though, was the other side, the ageism in the hiring, and even beyond ageism. I mean, it sounds like I'm being ageist here to assume that older workers want part-time, and a lot of them don't. But a lot that come to us do. And, we have 300 employees, probably 250 of those are frontline staff. That's where our older workers are. There's none of us over 65 in the actual running of this nonprofit. And why? I mean, we're a nonprofit that deals with older adults, and we don't even hire older adults in the positions. I mean, I feel like we need a radical change in the way the corporations and nonprofits look at older adult employees.
Yeah, I think,
Here.
Beth brought up before this concept that's post-pandemic of a quality job. And I think besides wages, the most important thing is flexibility. We have to listen to the workers, because you're right. Some older workers want to work part-time. I mean, let's be honest, if you have an acute medical condition, your doctor's visits alone are a part-time job. So some of them need to work part-time, but some people assume they only want to work part-time. And I think that the key component to a quality job and a quality career for me is listening to your worker, listening to the individual.
And there's a growing body of work that really quantifies that value of experience, but we do need to get it in front of the hiring managers and the C-suite. And I know there'll be a panel later today really talking about the role of employers, but I think it's so important to look at that magic in the mix of the multi-generational workforce, the increased productivity, innovation, and ultimately profits that Boston Consulting Group has been able to demonstrate when you do have a multi-generational workforce. Never mind the longevity economy and the incredible market opportunity that is the 50 plus, and the need to have a workforce that's reflective of that consumer's needs and desires. So lots of opportunity, but a lot of stigma to address. And we need to address it both with legislation, but also win over the hearts and minds of so many. Other questions?
Yeah, hi there. DCI, Camille Khan. Just from a parallel universe, I do a lot of work with offenders. And one of the things we've done in the UK is we have made it a requirement for employers to employ ex-offenders and to show that they have a history of doing that from data in order to qualify for bidding on government contracts. So if you, from this parallel universe, the second thing we did is we made a double tax deduction if you employed someone who has been an ex-offender for 2 years and they have not reoffended. Now, if you took that idea and you applied it to older workers and you made it a requirement in state and federal legislation and procurement contracts, public work contracts, that it's a requirement you hire 3%, 5%, and show not just a policy. We all have policies on hiring people. They don't do anything. What you do is you show from your data that you're hiring older people, and that qualifies you to bid on important government contracts. That's a game changer.
Fascinating, fascinating. Your thoughts?
So,
Since you did this.
I did, yeah. So one of my jobs in the federal government was in charge of federal procurement policy. And so some of those same principles applied, whether it was to minimum wage that we put in place, banning the box for contractors and the federal government. I think what's really critical in making those policies work is when the incentives in those programs are what cause employers to change behavior. And then they recognize that that individual who was just as involved is actually a fantastic employee and that they are really contributing to the company. Because when companies realize that they are missing out on talent, that's when you get the positive, you get the wheels going. So they're not just doing it, quote, because they have to, but they're doing it because it's good for their business and they're getting rewarded for it. And getting them over the barrier of trying is really important. So I think there's lots of opportunities to really think through how can we get employers to recognize the talent that's in front of them that's not there, that they're not tapping into. That is, diverse in all forms, that brings different backgrounds. And, when you get results like the BCG study, you can see that. And those kinds of policies are really interesting ways to move that forward.
Just one point. I think you should do it because you have to. Because we know that.
Yeah.
You have to start.
Yeah.
The policy lever is powerful, but ultimately when people see the results, then the flywheel starts to spin and they will expand their understanding of the opportunity.
Exactly.
So thank you all for a great conversation. We do have more time?
Yeah, go ahead.
Please? Okay, great.
Yeah,
Come
the,
online.
the
Please.
online audience is really enjoying this panel, so thank you. And they do have a question, which is, how should employers be addressing their own leadership teams so that they can create caregiver-inclusive workplaces?
Fabulous, great topic.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we're both going to say the same thing, right? I mean, it has to start at the top. They have to show by modeling. And if the CEO says to the C-suite, you've got to make this happen downstream, that's going to happen. If it just comes from the human resource person who many times doesn't report directly to the CEO, it's not going to change practice in the company.
What Jane said.
I usually say what Beth said.
And I think there are leading employers that understand that it needs to be paid family leave. There are employee resource groups for caregivers. Actually, I was talking with folks at Meta. They have over 3,000 employees in their caregiving employee resource group. And it spans the generations, all ages, all stages. The bookends have responsibilities, young children, partners, family members. And there's a lot to learn from those experiences and then apply to the work you're doing, the products and the services that you're making available as well.
And you don't lose other opportunities. I think women felt this in my generation, that if you were in birthing years, you were not given opportunities for career advancement because you were raising children, even though you were wonderful and working full time while you were doing that. I think it's acutely possible with older workers that, they give, you can have some time off to care for your partner, your whomever, but we're going to overlook you for this career jump because we know you're going to need time. I think it's very important. And by the way, I think it's impossible for this panel to end without saying discriminating by age is illegal. It's against the law. And we shouldn't be afraid to call it out when someone, because of race, gender, sexual orientation, or age, is given, the access is not given for a job opportunity. We should call it out. It's against the law.
It's against the law, and we have bipartisan support to further strengthen the law. The Protecting Older Workers Against Discrimination Act has passed the House. It's in the Senate. It has bipartisan support. It would provide even more teeth in terms of putting the onus of discrimination on the employer as opposed to the employee. So we're optimistic that we could see a win and further advancement there. So important. With that, we are over time, but it's been a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much for your questions and your engagement.